G'day gymnastics skill seekers, welcome back to another training vlog. It's currently phase 2 of 2023 for my gymnastics strength and flexibility training. So today's session is a mix of pancake flexibility, working towards that chest to floor pancake goal that I have. And then my gymnastics strength session is a mix of straddle L sit to planche, eccentric front levers, and also doing some straddle planche band assisted. So let's get stuck in. So starting the session with the flexibility stuff. My first exercise is just a 90-90 hip internal rotation. It's called an overcoming isometric, but in reality, it's very similar to like PNF stretching. So I'm sitting on the floor in this 90-90 position and I'm putting a weight on top of that rear foot and I'm actively trying to internally rotate that rear hip as much as I can. And we're using an isometric contraction here. So I'm lifting and contracting for 10 seconds, pushing into the weight as hard as I can, targeting the deep hip internal rotator muscles, then relaxing and repeating that isometric contraction for 3 reps of 10-second holds. Then I remove the weight and I'm going to do repetitions. So it's just 10 reps of lifting the leg as high as I can through hip internal rotation and then taking it back to the floor. My left side is definitely weaker than my right side, so I don't get the leg to lift as high, and I also get a little bit of cramping in the left side, so those muscles are definitely a little bit weaker. But I can remember, a few years ago I was doing the functional range conditioning certification, and we were doing this very exercise, and I don't think I could lift my foot off the floor. So even though I was training in the gym and I was doing heavy squats and heavy deadlifts and, I'd been training for a number of years, my flexibility and my strength in terms of my hip internal rotation just wasn't there. It wasn't something I trained a lot of, the hip capsule work, the internal rotation, the external rotation, the stretching, pigeon stretches, and actually targeted work. So the flexibility stuff has definitely improved over the years, and it's given me a set of hips that actually work, which I'm very grateful for. So after we've done that, I'm moving on to some seated straddle walkouts, supersetted with some standing pancake forward folds to target. It's a Zertcher setup that we're using for this. But anyway, the seated straddle walkouts, these are a real pain in the quads, like some serious cramps galore in the hip flexors when I'm doing this one. It feels like I'm lifting my legs a lot higher than the video actually shows, but that's the reality of it, I suppose. And I'm not sure it's much of a walkout, as more of a straddle stumble. So I'm just sort of doing my best to keep the angle closed between the torso and the thighs as I gradually try to walk the hands forward. I do think it's still an effective exercise. I've been doing a lot of the seated straddle leg lifts, and I see this as a good progression. The legs are obviously up a little bit higher, and I'm just really trying to hold, that angle closed as I bring the feet back down to the ground. The program says 4 to 6 reps, but at the moment I'm definitely sticking to the 4, so the lower end of the rep range, just because those quads and hip flexors want to start to cramp as I work through that. But let's see how that goes over the weeks ahead. That's supersetted with a standing pancake forward fold to target. So I think I've made the mistake here of going a little bit too wide. So I'm going quite wide here, which is moving more towards a middle split. Obviously it allows me to get deeper, so it's like this sort of false positive. I'm getting deeper in the forward fold, so this nice wide stance is great, it's working for me, but I don't think it is. So in week 2 I was playing around with that wide stance and I was elevated. In week 3 I've brought it in and made it narrower, for 2 reasons, but one is I think it's a little bit better to be a little bit narrower in that straddle stance. Emmett Lewis talks about, when we're doing a lot of this pancake work, having sort of 90 degrees to 110 degrees between the legs. So in terms of the hip angle there for a lot of straddle work. And if we go much wider than that, well, then we're sort of working more towards middle splits. So just trying to figure out the best way to measure that and sort of get that set up. The other reason is I'm going narrow because in my pancake stretching in week 2, I actually heard my Gracilis go pop which is like a muscle that runs from the hip down the medial side of the thigh, so inner side of the thigh, and crosses the knee joint. And just at the knee joint, on my last set of the weighted pancakes, I just heard this sort of a bit of a pop. It's not too sore, but yeah, I definitely feel it if I go too wide in this stance. So I want to keep training the flexibility, but I don't want to be working through pain, and a narrower stance is allowing me to work around that right now. So yeah, there are two reasons why I've gone a little bit narrower in that one. These two exercises work well together, the seated straddle walkouts and the standing pancake forward fold to target, because one is a posterior chain stretching exercise and the other one is an anterior chain strengthening exercise. So they support each other. As I lengthen the posterior chain, it allows me to get better core compression. As I work on the core compression, then it allows me to lengthen the posterior chain. I talk about that a lot in my core compression and forward fold flexibility program. That's a free download that you can get on the website. So if you haven't checked that out and you want to work on your core compression and your posterior chain flexibility, I suggest you check that out on the Sustainable Training website. Okay, the last part of my flexibility for the day is just the weighted pancakes. I've increased the weight here. So in the last few blocks, we've been doing sort of 15 kilos on my back. I'm now using a 20 kilo weight plate. And yeah, it's helping me get a little bit deeper. But as I said, on the last set in week 2, I was just hanging out in the bottom of that pancake and pop away it went. And you know, my coach had warned me, he said, like, once you start to get closer to that pancake, like, you've just got to be careful with it. You've got to be patient. I'm sitting there and I'm trying to pull myself deeper, engaging the hip flexors, pulling down, working on hip internal, external rotation, rocking side to side, just fighting to get deeper. And maybe I just pushed a little bit too much too soon. So I'm glad to say in week 3, doing that pancake stuff just yesterday, I can still do it, but I'm just not forcing myself deeper. I'm just more relaxing into that pancake and not doing all the additional stuff to try and sink deeper. I'm feeling a great stretch in and around sort of gluteal fold, hamstring connection. So yeah, I'll just take it easy and try to avoid working through any pain in that. But yeah, it's getting better. Definitely range of motion's improving, and I'm feeling pretty good about the pancake progression so far. But that's my flexibility for the day. And then after that, I move into my GST warm-up and then into my GST strength training session. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so part of my warm-up today is actually a little bit of a shoulder prehab routine. So I'm lying prone on the floor and I'm starting with like T arm lifts. So really focusing on keeping the shoulders depressed and then trying to retract the shoulders as much as I can as I lift the arms up and down. There's 10 reps in each one of these movements. So after doing the T's, I'll move to more of a Y position and again do the arm lifts here, again keeping shoulders depressed here, and this is sort of working lower trapezius, or what I like to call the trap 3. From there, I move into more of an I shape with the arms overhead and lifting the arms up and down for 10 more repetitions here, again trying to keep the shoulders a little bit more depressed in this position. I'm then going to switch and move to sort of W. So we start with the arms straight overhead and then we're bending the elbows and pulling the elbows down by our sides in this one. So this starts to get a little bit more of the rotator cuffs because you're trying to keep the hands and the forearms off the floor. So as we bring the arms and the elbows down, the rotator cuff muscles are working. Then after 10 reps of that, we're doing sort of like swimmers. So the arms are staying straight, they're starting overhead. I'm bringing them all the way around and then behind my glutes and then going back up again. And that's 1 repetition and we're after 10 reps of that. So in the first couple of weeks, I'm just sticking to body weight and I can get through all of this unbroken, which is the objective. And then we start to increase the weight. So next week might be half a kilo, it might be 1 kilo weights in each hand. And can I get through all of these five movements without stopping and doing 10 reps on each of them. So this just really targets a lot of the muscles in the back and it's really good for, shoulder health and scapular health. So I really like this little warm up. It's a good one to add to my routine. All right, so once I've been through the warm-up, I'm going to start with straddle L-sits to an open tuck planche on the P-bars. Now, when I first read this in the program, my initial thoughts were, fat chance, that's not going to happen because my planche has been a real struggle in the past. I've always found it difficult to get past that tuck planche. And, last phase, I'm just starting to get the open tuck planche. And now my coach wants me to move from a straddle L-sit, which I'm not very good at, into an open tuck planche, which I'm not very good at. But anyway, let's give it a shot. So I surprised myself. I could actually move from, my straddle L-sit position into an open tuck planche. It fatigues quite quickly. He's asking 3 repetitions and I'm trying to work through that. But, my first rep on each set's pretty good. Second rep is okay. By the third rep, that straight arm strength is just fatigued. So moving from that deep shoulder depression position into more of a strong protraction position while keeping the arms straight is definitely something that I need to continue to work on. But the lever length, like when we're sitting in that straddle position with the legs straight, it definitely sort of helps. Like it's bringing the weight forward, so it allows me to lean the shoulders forward. It allows me to lift the hips up. It allows me to move closer to that sort of open tuck planche, and then I just have to bend the knees and hit that position. So it was a little bit, I'm not going to say easy, but it was easier than I thought when I first read it on the program. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, for years, I've tried to train the planche and it's come and gone from my program. For a while, I was trying to follow, Gymnastics Bodies Programming, but that's just ridiculous programming. The progressions there just don't make any sense. There's not a gymnast out there that trains the tuck planche up to 20 seconds before they start training, straddle planche or other variations. There's really not a lot of carryover from the tuck planche to the straddle planche because they're very different positions. So we don't want to spend too much time on, sort of training the tuck planche and increasing the endurance there. It just doesn't make sense because the positions just change the way the load is, how the body works, and we want to start exploring the more advanced variations as soon as we can in any way, shape or form. So I'm enjoying this one. I find it difficult. I look forward to seeing how the progress goes over the next sort of 6 weeks. That's supersetted with eccentric front levers. Now, in the past, I've had a lot of trouble with this in terms of being able to hold the false grip. So I've just been training the front lever without the false grip. But now I'm just like, I'm going to force myself, okay? Even though it's harder, let's just make it happen. So I don't feel I control the eccentric as well at the moment while using the false grip, but it's my ambition to be able to hold it with the false grip. And in the long run, I think this is going to help me progress faster. So it's just a matter of sucking it up and working my way through it. One thing that's helped is I'm using what's called foam tape. So I put foam tape around the wrist and then I put the athletic tape over the top of the foam tape, and that just adds a little bit more of a comfort factor to the wrist. I find it easier to hold onto the rings and maintain that false grip when that happens. Grip's one of the first things to go when you start to fatigue. So if you haven't been sleeping well and eating well and recovering well, that false grip is going to be something that you're going to struggle with. So just sort of be aware of that if you're training a lot of grip stuff and then you feel like, geez, my grip strength's not on today. Maybe it's just the fact that the fatigue's kicking in and you need a little bit more rest, you need a little bit more food, you need to focus on the recovery stuff. Besides that, the eccentric front levers, like I said, I'm not feeling the same sensation in my sort of mid to lower back here with this sort of false grip, but I am feeling that it's working. I'm still feeling that the back muscles are working and the lats are working, it's just maybe something new, something I've got to play with. I'm experimenting with like pulling the rings apart or pushing the rings together, just playing with this and trying to figure out, what's the best setup for me, what's going to work well for me in terms of being able to lower down into that front lever. Again, I find the first rep I can go slower, but then I'm doing 3 repetitions here of lowering down for 5 sets, and the fatigue starts to kick in as I reach for that third rep, and of course as I go through more sets. I do enjoy the eccentric front levers a little bit more than potentially doing the isometrics or potentially doing the concentric pulls, maybe because it feels like I'm better at these than the other two. But I'm glad to have this in the program. I think it's a good progression to work on, definitely working on the eccentrics. I find that the hollow body is a little bit easier than the straddle. I don't know why, but I just find that I can create more tension in the body, and the full, sort of front lever position I can control better than I can in the straddle position. So be keen to see how this goes over the weeks ahead. So they're A1 and A2. It's 5 sets, 3 reps in each set of those two. So working between the straddle L-sit to open tuck planche and my front lever eccentrics. Now after that, we're moving to a straddle planche with band assistance. So I'm using a few bands here and just sort of playing around with this. I've not really done too much straddle planche work, and in the first couple of weeks I could tell that my position was sort of off. My hips were quite high, the shoulder lean wasn't forward enough. I was experimenting with trying to contract the glutes and lift the legs higher, then the shape was all wrong. I just couldn't quite get a sensation of what this should look like, what this should feel like. The P-bars were too far forward, so the band was sort of pulling me not only up but also back. So it's just like experimenting with this and starting to build a little bit more of an awareness of what this setup should look like and how the body should feel. In week 3, I was like, okay, I'm going to bring the P-bars right back underneath the pull-up bar, so the band is going to pull me more vertically, the hips more straight up. And I knew I needed to get the torso lower. So I was playing with the setup on this, and I was like, okay, what I'm going to try to do is not create so much of a posterior pelvic tilt, but more create like an anterior pelvic tilt here. So in the setup, I'm trying to think, okay, tilt anteriorly, and at the same time, I've got to think protract and depress the shoulders, and it's an unusual feeling. I'm not used to that, so it feels a little bit uncomfortable. But when I do that and I lean forward into the straddle planche, the position is just drastically different, and it feels much better and it looks much better. So while the feet are on the ground, I'm thinking about that anterior pelvic tilt. I know you don't see much of it. It looks more like a flat back, but that's what I'm trying to think about, and it definitely has changed the shape here in this straddle planche hold. The goal is to hold 8 to 10 seconds. I'm not achieving that just yet. I could play with more band tension, so I'll see how I go with that. I'm going to have to order some more bands if that's what I want to do. But I'd also like to be able to keep maybe this band assistance and not go too much more, because I want to be able to train the movement. I want to feel that I'm getting strong there. I don't want to feel that the bands are doing all the work for me. So now that I've got the position right, I don't think it'll take too long for me to be able to get that sort of 8 to 10 seconds when I start to train this. So I'll progress with it over the next few weeks and see how I go. Hopefully this will stay in the program for a while, which I'm assuming it will. And then if that doesn't sort of stick, then I'll start to just try and use some more band assistance there. That's pretty much it for day 2 of my gymnastics flexibility and strength training. If you've got any questions or comments about this, feel free to add it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy these vlogs and they're motivating you to continue with your own gymnastics flexibility and strength training. If you are a gymnastics skill seeker and you're looking to build strength, increase flexibility, and unlock gymnastic skills that you never thought possible, then head over to the Sustainable Training Method website. We offer online personal training, and we also have a number of skill-based programs that you can purchase online. We've also got a free one up there at the moment, which is all about core compression strength and forward fold flexibility. So download that, check that out as well. So until next time, happy training.